She had been sitting in the same corner of the maintenance corridor for 3 days before Marcus finally said something. He noticed her the first morning, the way you notice a smudge on a window, not quite consciously, just a register at the edge of your vision that something is slightly wrong with the world. She was small, even by Velhari standards. Most of the Velhari on Outpost Thurin stood somewhere between 5 and 6 feet, their bone-white exoskeletal ridges catching the light in ways that always made Marcus think of moth wings. This one barely came up to his chest, and she sat with her secondary arms folded tight against her thorax, the way his niece used to fold her arms when she was trying not to cry in public. He did not approach her the first day. He had a section of atmosphere processors to service in Block 7, and his supervisor, a heavy-set man named Price who sweated through every shirt before noon, had made it clear that Marcus was already on thin ice for the incident with the coolant relay. He kept his head down and his tool bag close and did his job. He did not approach her the second day either. The outpost's social rules were clear even if they were unwritten. The humans on Thurin were contractors, maintenance and technical support staff on a station that was officially Velhari territory. You smiled. You were professional. You did not interfere in things that were not your business. The Velhari had a word for it, something that sounded like a door being sealed, and Marcus had learned early that his translation chip rendered it as the appropriate distance. Every culture here maintained the appropriate distance from every other culture. It was how the outpost ran smoothly. It was how people like Marcus kept their contracts. But on the third morning, he came around the corner into Corridor G9 with his coffee still too hot to drink, and she was still there. Same spot, same position. And this time he saw that her feeding slits, the thin lateral openings along the lower portion of a Velhari face, not quite a mouth in any human sense, were pale and drawn in tight. He had seen that look before, not on a Velhari. On his younger sister, when she was 12 and too proud to ask their father for lunch money and had gone 3 days on water and crackers before their mother found out. Marcus stopped walking. He looked down at the bag in his hand. 2 sandwiches, because he always made 2 when he had night shift and not enough breakfast, and a small container of the pickled protein strips that the canteens sold as a joke snack, but which were actually the most calorie-dense thing on the whole station. He had been planning to eat 1 sandwich at the midpoint of his shift and save the rest for the walk home to his bunk. He looked at the girl. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the wall with the focused, interior attention of someone who has decided that dignity is the only thing left that belongs to them. He sat down on the floor of the corridor, which was cold and slightly damp from a condensation issue he had actually filed a ticket about 2 weeks prior. He opened his bag. He set 1 sandwich on the ground beside him. He opened his coffee and took a sip because the coffee was finally cool enough, and he looked at the opposite wall. After a while he said, without looking at her, "I always make too much." She did not respond. "That one's just going to get dry if nobody eats it," he said. "Shame, really. Took me 10 minutes this morning to get the ratios right on the spread." As he could feel her looking at him now, he did not look back. Another long pause. Then very quietly, in the precise, formal standard that the Velhari used when addressing species they were not certain of, she said, "You are offering this to me." "I'm leaving it on the floor," he said. "What happens after that is none of my business." He drank his coffee. He ate his own sandwich slowly. He did not watch her. He listened to the corridor hum around him, the distant pulse of the atmosphere processors, the far-off clatter of a cargo lift somewhere in Block 3, and he finished his meal and folded his wrapper neatly and tucked it in his bag. When he stood up, the sandwich was gone. There were a few small crumbs on the floor that he chose not to notice. As he picked up his tool bag, he looked at the wall above her head, not at her. "Same time tomorrow," he said, as if this were simply a fact about the universe, and walked away. Her name, as she eventually told him on the 5th day, was Seva. Not her full name. The full name she explained with the careful precision the Velhari brought to all things linguistic was a sequence of 42 tonal syllables that encoded her lineage, her hatching cohort, and her standing within the social network of her family. What she gave him was the informal diminutive, the version used between equals of similar age who had established a basic trust. Marcus told her his name in R. Saturn and did not mention that he had no diminutive and no lineage title, and that where he came from, your name was just your name. She thought about this for a long time. Then how do people know who your family is? She asked. Well, you ask, he said, and if they do not answer honestly, you find out eventually. She found this deeply troubling. He could tell because her ridge membranes, the translucent cartilage structures along her crest, shifted to a darker amber color. His translation chip had a note in its Velhari cultural database about ridge color. Amber indicated what the chip described as effortful recalibration, the process of trying to fit new information into an existing framework when the existing framework was not quite the right shape. I have been told, Seva said carefully, that humans are a species of significant social disorder. Who told you that? A pause, my tutors. He looked at her for a moment. She had tutors. That was interesting for a child who had been sitting alone in a maintenance corridor for 3 days without food. What else did your tutors tell you? He asked. That humans are impulsive, tribalistic, and prone to emotional decisions that contradict their own interests. Oh, sure, he said. She waited, clearly expecting him to argue. Probably true, he added. Her ridge membranes shifted color again, something he didn't have a word for. The translation chip offered a state of pleasurable cognitive surprise, which he suspected was the closest it could get. They ate in silence for a while. He had brought the pickled protein strips today, and she took 3 of them with the delicate precision of someone who has been raised to eat only at formal occasions and was still working out how to do it casually. He pretended not to notice when she took a 4th. Why are you here? He asked eventually. Not in the corridor, he had figured that out from context, that she had run from somewhere and not yet made the decision to go back. He meant on the outpost, on Thurin. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that he figured she was not going to answer, and he was fine with that. I was meant to be observed, she said finally. There is a Velhari custom. Before a young person of certain standing is formally introduced to the broader network of their family's obligations, they are sent somewhere small, somewhere that does not know who they are, to learn what they are like when no one is watching. He nodded. He had heard of something like it. A Rumspringa, a gap year, a walkabout. Every culture had some version of the idea. And what have you learned? He asked. The amber was back. That it is easier to sit in a corridor and feel sorry for myself than I expected. He almost laughed. He stopped himself in time because he could see from the careful steadiness of her posture that this was not something she found funny yet, even if she might someday. Instead, he said, "Yeah, that one gets most people." "Oh, it did not get you," she said. "Sure it did," he said. "I just had a specific job to get on with, so the getting on with kept me busy." As she considered this, do you find the work meaningful? He thought about it honestly. Some of it, the good maintenance work, the kind where you find a problem nobody spotted yet and you fix it before it becomes a catastrophe, that's satisfying. A lot of it's just keeping things running that would stop if I wasn't there. I don't know if that's meaning or just usefulness. Is there a difference? He picked up his coffee. It had gone cold because he had been talking instead of drinking it, which Price would have said was typical. I used to think so, he said. I'm less sure these days. Well, 6 weeks passed. Marcus learned to bring extra food not as charity, but as matter of course. In the same tone, he brought extra calibration tools, because the G-block atmosphere processors had quirks that occasionally demanded a second set of readings. He learned that Seva's ridge membranes went pale gray when she was tired and deep violet blue when she was working hard at understanding something. He learned that Velhari young people of her apparent age were in what their culture called the second shaping, a period of intensive philosophical and ethical development where the core structure of a person's values was laid down in something close to permanent form. He learned that Seva had left the formal schooling environment of her family because one of her tutors had said something to her about the nature of obligation that had struck her as deeply, cosmically wrong, and she had not been able to explain why. "What did he say?" Marcus asked. "That obligation exists to maintain order," she said. "That when we fulfill our obligations to those above us and those below us fulfill theirs to us, and so on all the way through the network, this is what the Velhari word Vethara means. The beauty of a working order." He said this was the highest good. "And you disagreed." I did not know how to disagree. I only knew that it felt like a window with something missing outside of it, like being told a painting of a field is the same as a field. Marcus was quiet for a while, working on a faulty pressure seal while she talked. He liked when she talked while he worked. It helped him focus somehow, having another voice in the corridor. "My grandmother," Seva said, "used to tell me a different thing. She said that obligation without care is architecture without a house inside it, that the structure only has meaning because someone lives in it." He set down his wrench. "Your grandmother sounds smart." "She is the wisest person I have ever known," Seva said, and there was something in her voice that the translation chip flagged as too complex to render. It gave him three options: profound reverence, unresolved grief, and a third concept that the chip simply labeled as untranslatable/Velhari specific, with a footnote that said this was a form of love that encompassed both the speaker and the beloved within a shared identity, so that to speak of the beloved was also to speak of a part of oneself. He did not press her on it. He went back to the pressure seal. After a while she said, "She does not know where I am. Are you okay with that?" A long pause. "I do not know yet." The trouble started in week 7, and it started, as trouble on Outpost Thurin almost always did, with a docking dispute. A Velhari cargo hauler had arrived 3 days late on a resupply contract, and the outpost's logistics coordinator, a sharp-tempered Velhari administrator named Overseer Drath, had levied a substantial penalty fee against the hauler's crew chief. This was standard. This was procedure. What was not standard was that the crew chief in question happened to be the fourth-tier nephew of a minor but well-connected family in the Eastern Correspondence Network, which was a political arrangement Marcus understood only in the same vague way he understood quantum tunneling. He knew it existed and that it mattered, and that it was above his clearance to have an opinion about. The crew chief disputed the fee in the public registry. Drath increased the fee. The crew chief filed a formal grievance that included, in the way these things always seem to include something extra, an addendum about the irregular and uncertified social contact between a human maintenance worker and an unaffiliated Velhari juvenile in Corridor G9. Marcus found out about this the way he found out about most things. Price called him into the office and told him, with the expression of a man who is personally exhausted by other people's problems. "I need you to stop," Price said. "Stop what?" "Is eating lunch in that corridors." Marcus sat with this for a moment. "I'm eating my lunch in the corridor. That's not against policy. The contact with the juvenile is what's in question. The contact is I leave a sandwich on the floor and go back to work." Price wiped his forehead. "Marcus, I'm telling you as a friend, this crew chief has put our whole maintenance contract in the addendum if the overseer decides our team is a source of social disruption." "She was going hungry," Marcus said. Price stopped. I noticed she was going hungry, Marcus said again more quietly. I had extra food, I shared it, that's all. That is not how the Velhari see it. Then I don't know what to tell you, Marcus said, because that's what happened. Price looked at him for a long time. Price was a complicated man. Marcus had worked for him for 3 years, and he had seen Price be petty, and he had seen Price be generous, and he had seen him navigate an extraordinary amount of bureaucratic pressure without ever quite breaking, which Marcus respected even when it frustrated him. If you keep doing this, Price said finally, and it costs us the contract, there are 16 people on this team who go home with nothing. You understand that? I understand that, Marcus said. And I understand it, Marcus said. I don't know what else I can tell you. I understand the cost. I'm asking you if the cost is actually real or if someone is using it as leverage in a completely separate argument. Price's face did something complicated. He looked out the window of his office at the gray skin of the outpost wall beyond the glass. He seemed to be counting something internally. I'll talk to the logistics coordinator, he said at last. Don't go back to that corridor today. Okay, Marcus said. Just today, Price added, which was as close as he ever came to giving Marcus permission for anything. Marcus went and serviced his processors. Aseva found him. He was in Block 4, running a diagnostic on the secondary thermal exchange array, when he heard the light double tap on the corridor wall that they had developed without ever discussing it, as a way of announcing presence without startling. He turned around and she was standing there, and even before his Tian chip could process her ridge color, he could see by the set of her secondary arms drawn close, vibrating almost imperceptibly, that something was wrong in a way that was different from the usual wrongs. Someone came, she said. He waited. From the family network, she said, a functionary, he found my registered quarter. A pause. He told me the observation period was concluded, that I was required to present myself at the formal registry within 48 hours or be logged as willfully noncompliant. He said, her voice shifted. He said that there had been complaints about my associates. Marcus set down his diagnostic reader. About me. He said the interaction was inappropriate, that a Velhari of my standing should not have permitted it, that I had brought a potential social complication to the family's network by allowing, she stopped, started again, by allowing a human to perceive that I was in need. As he looked at her carefully, are you in trouble? I am always in some form of trouble, she said, with a dryness that surprised him. The question is whether the trouble is the kind you survive with dignity or the kind you survive without it. A pause. He told me to come in quietly. He told me to sign a document saying the contact was incidental and unintentional and that I did not seek it. And is that true? She was quiet for a long time. No, she said. The contact was not incidental. You are the first person in 6 weeks who has spoken to me as if I were simply a person and not a reflection of my family's social position. I will not sign a document that says that was an accident. Marcus picked up his diagnostic reader again. He turned it over in his hands. What happens if you don't sign? He asked. The non-compliance is logged, she said. It will be a complication in my family's network. There will be negotiations. My grandmother will likely have to spend social capital she would prefer to spend on other things. Is your grandmother going to be angry with you? The untranslatable color was back in her ridges. She is going to understand exactly why I did it, Seva said. And she is going to be angry with me for a small amount of time and proud of me for a much longer amount of time, and she will not say either of these things directly. He almost laughed again. This time he let himself quietly. You know what, he said, that's pretty much how my mother operates too. He went to the administrative level the next morning. He had never been to the administrative level before. It was separated from the maintenance and contractor areas by a series of internal airlocks that were not locked, but which communicated very clearly through their design that they were not intended for people like Marcus. The floors were a different material up here, some kind of polished composite that the Velhari used for spaces where they wanted to communicate permanence. The light was slightly different too, filtered in a spectrum that Marcus's eyes registered as a vague headache, and that was apparently optimal for Velhari Ridge health. Well, he asked to see Overseer Drath, the administrative functionary who greeted him, a young Velhari with very pale ridges and the expression of someone who has spent their career protecting their superior from inconveniences, told him the overseer did not have open appointments. I know, Marcus said. I'm a maintenance contractor. I'm not on the appointment calendar. But I'd like to file a formal statement regarding the grievance that was filed against my team. A pause you may file in writings. I'd prefer to file in person, Marcus said. It's a Velhari cultural right actually, I looked it up. Article 14 of the Outpost Thurin Operational Charter, which was negotiated under Velhari civil law, grants any person residing on the station the right to verbal statement in response to a formal grievance that names them before the overseer rules. Another pause longers. You researched this, the functionary said. I had a quiet evening, Marcus said. He waited in the anteroom for 2 hours. He had brought coffee. He had also, because he was who he was and could not quite help it, brought a sandwich, which he ate slowly and quietly, and without apology while 3 Velhari administrative staff tried very hard to pretend he was not there. Overseer Drath came out at the end of the 2 hours. She was taller than most Velhari Marcus had encountered, with deep amber ridges, the permanent structural amber of old wood, not the shifting amber of processing, and she looked at him with the particular expression of a person who has found something in their schedule that was not supposed to be there, and is deciding whether it is a threat or merely an inconvenience. You are the human who was named in the crew chief's addendum, she said. Oh yes, he said. And you wish to make a verbal statement. Oh yes. She looked at him for a moment. Most humans, she said, are unaware of. Article 14. I am now one human who is aware of it, he said. Something moved across her face that the translation chip flagged as a query it could not fully resolve. She stepped back and gestured toward her office. He went in, he sat down across from her enormous desk. He put his coffee cup on the floor because there was nowhere else to put it, and he did not want to presume. He said the grievance addendum implies that I engaged in some form of inappropriate social interference. I want to state for the formal record that what I did was leave food near a child who was hungry. I did not ask her name until she offered it. I did not ask about her family or her station. I did not discuss politics or contracts or social standing. I noticed someone was not eating and I had extra and I shared it. Drath looked at him with those deep amber eyes. You understand, she said, that the nature of the child standing makes the situation more complicated than you may realize. I understand that now, Marcus said. I didn't at the time. At the time I understood that she was small and she was going without food and I could do something about that. A long silence. This is the human impulse you are describing, Drath said, not as a question. As an observation, the way a person observes a weather pattern. I suppose so, Marcus said. You did not consider the social architecture, Drath said, the appropriate distance, the implications for your team's contract. I considered it later, Marcus said. After, I considered it and I went back anyway. Why? He looked at his hands. He was quiet for a moment, and he was aware that Drath was watching him with genuine attention, not the performance of attention that administrators often offered, but the real thing, the kind that has taken its reading and is waiting for the rest of the data. Because I made a habit of going, he said finally, and she had made a habit of being there, And some things, once you've started them, you can't stop without costing yourself something you'd rather keep. You are describing obligation, Drath said. Maybe, he said, or just I gave my word, even if I didn't say it out loud. You can give your word without saying it. Drath was very still. Her ridges had gone a color that Marcus had never seen before, a deep, muted blue that his chip flagged as not in its cultural reference database. The child, she said carefully, you are aware that she will return to her family. Oh, yes. And that your contract, depending on the resolution of this grievance, may be subject to review. Oh, yes. And you still came here to speak on her behalf in the formal registry. I came to tell the truth about what happened, he said. I'm not really speaking on her behalf. She can speak for herself. I just wanted on record that she didn't do anything wrong. The silence stretched out for a long time. Then Overseer Drath said, carefully and precisely, the Velhari have a word Vethara for the beauty of order correctly maintained. It is one of our highest values. We spend considerable energy on the architecture of correct behavior. She paused. We do not have a word for what you have just described, what you have done, giving a wordless word, returning because the return itself was the promise. A pause. We do not have a word for that. Marcus picked up his coffee cup from the floor. It was cold now, he drank it anyway. We don't really have a great one either, he said. We mostly just call it showing up. The formal grievance was resolved in the standard way, which is to say through a long and complex Velhari administrative process that Marcus understood only in its outcome. His team's contract was not pulled, and the crew chief's penalty fee was upheld with a notation about the impropriety of using a separate dispute as leverage in a docking matter. He did not see Seva for 12 days after that. He went back to Corridor G9 twice in the first week, because the atmosphere processors were in that block and he had legitimate work there. And both times the corridor was empty and he did not leave a sandwich because that would have felt too much like waiting. And he did not like to wait for things he was not certain would come. On the 13th day, a formal message arrived in his contractor inbox. It was addressed to him in full, his name, his contractor designation, his registered bunk assignment, and it was written in the High Velhari Register, which his translation chip informed him was used for official communications between parties of significant status differential, almost exclusively when the higher status party was addressing the lower status party with deliberate elevation, which meant that someone of significant standing was choosing to speak to him, as if he mattered considerably more than his station suggested. Well, the message was brief. It said, your statement has been received and formally notated in the administrative record O. F. Outpost Thurin. On behalf of the family Sevethrinal, I express gratitude for your accurate account of events and for the care you demonstrated for my granddaughter during her period of self-directed study. It is the considered view of the Sevethrinal family that your conduct represents an approach to interspecies relations that we would benefit from understanding more thoroughly. You are invited, at your convenience, to a formal introduction. The invitation is extended in the spirit of Vethar Reketh, which you will not find in your translation database, as it is a term our family uses internally. The order that is built around a living thing, rather than the living thing that is built around the order. It was signed, in the 42 tonal syllables of her full lineage name, by the Empress Emerita of the Velhari Eastern Correspondence Network, who had been governing something very close to half of the settled space in this region of the galaxy for the better part of 60 years. Marcus read the message twice. He set his tablet down on his cot. He thought about his sister, who had called him 6 months ago to say that she had taken a new position and that her daughter had started secondary school, and that she wished he would come home sometime and not live his whole life in the maintenance corridors of other people's stations. He thought about bad coffee and pressure seals and the specific satisfying weight of a wrench that is exactly the right size for the job you are doing. He thought about a small girl sitting in a cold corridor with her secondary arms folded tight, and her feeding slits pale with something she was too proud to name. He thought about his own grandmother, who had kept a small ceramic dish of hard candies on her kitchen windowsill for the entirety of his childhood, and who had never once said directly that she loved him, but who had always kept the dish full, and who had always known without being told when he needed one. He picked up his tablet. He typed a brief reply. He said, "Thank you for the message. I would like to meet you very much. I have Thursdays free." He met her on a Thursday. She was small, which surprised him, though it probably shouldn't have. She had the deep, settled amber ridges of old age and long authority, and she moved through the formal reception room with the particular stillness of someone who has spent decades being the most important person in every room and is no longer interested in announcing it. Seva was with her. She stood slightly behind and to the left, in the formal position that Marcus's cultural database said indicated family under protection, and she had the look of someone who was working very hard at being composed and was mostly succeeding. The Empress Emerita looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, in careful standard, with an accent that carried the rhythms of a language that predated the common tongue by several centuries, "So you are the man who gave my granddaughter lunch." "I gave her half a sandwich," he said. "She did the rest." Something moved in the old Velhari's eyes that had nothing to do with ridge color. It was simpler than that and older. "Yes," she said. "She did, she always has." A pause. "I am told you are not particularly important." "Well, that's accurate," he said. "I am told your contract is modest, and your rank is low, and your influence on this outpost is limited to the mechanical systems in Block 7. "That's also accurate." "And yet," she said, "my granddaughter sat in a cold corridor for nearly 2 months making sense of the world, and the only person who bothered to notice was you." He didn't have anything to say to that, so he said nothing. The Empress Emerita looked at him for a long moment longer. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, because I am very old and I have very little patience for polite inaccuracy." "All right," he said. "When you first saw her," she said, "you did not know who she was." "No." "You did not know her family or her standing, or that she was the granddaughter of anyone at all." "I knew she was going hungry," he said. "That was all I knew." The old Velhari was quiet for a moment that felt very long. "And that was enough," she said. "Oh yes," he said. "Tell me why," she said. He looked at his hands. He looked at the formal reception room around him, the polished composite floors, the different light, the enormous weight of everything that this woman represented in the political architecture of this region of space. He looked at Seva, who was watching him with her ridge membranes cycling through the untranslatable color. "I don't know that I can explain it," he said honestly. "I had extra, she needed it. The distance between those two things seemed very short." The Empress Emerita made a sound that his translation chip could not parse. It was not laughter exactly. It was something that contained laughter the way a river contains rain, older, broader, made of ma. "Then why things accumulated." "In all my years," she said, "I have never heard the principle of care reduced to something so simple." She paused, "and never heard it stated so correctly." She reached into the deep pocket of her formal robing and removed something. She held it out to him. It was a small ceramic dish. It was plain, no family markings, no ornamental ridge patterns, nothing to indicate that it belonged to anyone of significance. It was the kind of dish you would put on a kitchen windowsill. It would hold perhaps a handful of small objects. "This belonged to my mother," the Empress Emerita said. "She kept it filled always with small things to give away. She said the point was not the things themselves. The point was the keeping full." A pause. My granddaughter tells me you reminded her of this principle. She could not tell me how, only that you did. Marcus took the dish carefully. It was lighter than it looked. He turned it over in his hands. He thought, for no reason he could name, about a ceramic dish on a kitchen windowsill a very long time ago, and a grandmother who had never once said directly that she loved him. He looked up. Seva was watching him. Her ridge membranes were the deep violet blue of someone working very hard at understanding something. Her secondary arms were loose at her sides. She looked like someone who was still in the second shaping, still building the framework of her values, still deciding what kind of person she intended to be, and who had added, somewhere in the last 2 months, one new piece to the structure. He held up the dish slightly in her direction. She looked at it for a moment. Then slowly she nodded, as if confirming something. He tucked it carefully into the front pocket of his work jacket, next to his calibration tools and his coffee thermos and the spare protein bar he always kept there because you never knew. He zipped the pocket closed. Outside, somewhere in the corridors of Outpost Thurin, the atmosphere processors hummed on. If you made it to the end of this story, then you already know why HFY hits differently than anything else in science fiction. It is not about the ships or the weapons or the treaties. It is about a man with a sandwich and a cold corridor, and a decision so small that most people would not even call it a decision. Thank you for listening. If this story found its way into something in your chest, something you can't quite name, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment, because every single one of those tells me someone out there is listening, and that is the only reason I keep making these. Until next time, stay kind. Even when no one's watching, especially then.